The morning sky above Seoul turned dark as massive ships blotted out the sun. Commander Kang Miho pressed his face against the cold window of the space station, watching the enormous vessels take position over Earth's biggest cities. The ships looked like giant crystals, beautiful but terrifying, each one larger than a mountain. "Commander, something is coming through," Lieutenant Park Soo-jin called from her station. Her hands shook as she worked the controls. Strange symbols appeared on her screen, then slowly changed into words she could read. The voice that filled the space station was cold and emotionless, like a machine trying to sound important. "People of Earth, I am Fleet Admiral Thexvar of the Dominion Coalition. You have 72 hours to give up your governments, your armies, and your freedom. Do what we say or we will burn your cities to nothing." Down on Earth, in Seoul's Blue House, President Lee Jae-won sat at a large table surrounded by her advisors. Video screens showed leaders from around the world, all watching the same impossible sight above their cities. But instead of screaming or crying, something strange happened. The room became very quiet and calm. General Kim Do-hyun, an old soldier with scars on his hands, walked to the big screen on the wall. He started pulling up old files and pictures from Korea's past. Images of ancient battles, old wars, and brave people who had fought against enemies much bigger than themselves. "Madam President," he said in a voice that was steady and sure, "they are making the same mistake that every enemy has made before. They think we will give up when things get hard." President Lee looked at the pictures on the screen. She saw her grandfather in an old military uniform from the Korean War. She saw pictures of farmers who had fought Japanese soldiers with nothing but old hunting rifles. She saw children who had carried messages through enemy lines during the worst times in Korea's history. Then President Lee smiled. It was not a happy smile, but the kind of smile a tiger makes when it sees prey. It was the same smile Korean warriors had worn when Mongol armies came with thousands of horses. It was the same smile Korean mothers had worn when Japanese soldiers tried to take their children. It was the smile of people who had never really been beaten, no matter how many times enemies had claimed victory. "General," she said quietly, "send them everything. Every battle we have ever fought. Every time someone said we could not win. Every time we proved them wrong. Let them read about what happens to armies that think Koreans will kneel." The alien ships floating above Earth had computers that could see everything. They watched for human soldiers getting ready to fight. They looked for people running away from cities. They searched for signs that humans were preparing for war. But they found none of those things. Instead, their computers started receiving thousands and thousands of files from Earth. Stories about battles that happened hundreds of years ago. Records of wars where small groups of humans had fought giant armies and won. Pictures of soldiers who had held their ground when everyone said they should run away. The files kept coming. Stories about Korean turtle ships that had sunk huge Japanese fleets. Reports about American and Korean soldiers at a place called Chosin Reservoir, where they had fought Chinese armies in freezing cold and somehow survived. Videos of farmers in Vietnam who had defeated the most powerful military in the world using nothing but determination and clever tricks. Admiral Thexvar sat in his command chair aboard the huge flagship, looking at these strange transmissions with confusion. His computer advisors told him this was just primitive mind games, the kind of things scared people do when they know they cannot win a real fight. "Sir," one of his officers reported, "our battle computers say there is a 99.8% chance the humans will surrender before the deadline." These historical files appear to be their way of asking for more time to make the surrender official. But the admiral felt something was wrong. In all his years of conquering planets, he had never seen people react this way. Usually, when his ships appeared, the local leaders would send desperate messages begging for mercy. They would offer him their treasures, their technology, anything to make the terrible ships go away. The humans were doing something different. They were not begging. They were not offering gifts. Instead, they were telling him stories about their grandfathers' wars. As the hours passed, more and more messages came from Earth. But these were not from governments or military leaders. These came from schools, from small towns, from ordinary people. Children sent drawings of their ancestors fighting monsters. Old people recorded videos telling stories their parents had told them about never giving up. And in every message, the same words appeared over and over again. "Our grandparents said no to monsters before. We say no to you." The admiral's computers could translate the words, but they could not explain why millions of humans were saying the same thing. They could not understand why people who should be terrified were instead telling stories about old battles. They could not calculate what it meant when an entire planet looked up at impossible odds and simply smiled. But deep in Admiral Thexvar's mind, something cold and worried began to grow. Because in all his conquests, in all the worlds that had knelt before his fleet, He had never encountered anything like this. He had never met a species that responded to threats by telling stories about how they had beaten bigger threats before. The countdown continued, but for the first time in his career, the Admiral began to wonder if his computers might be wrong about the 99.8% chance of victory. Captain Yoon Ha-jin stood on the deck of his warship, the USS Incheon, watching the strange alien craft fly overhead like metal birds. The ship rocked gently in the yellow sea as he held his binoculars up to his eyes. The alien scouts moved in perfect lines, scanning everything below them with bright beams of light. "Captain," called Ensign Choi Yunji from inside the ship's control room. She was a young woman who had joined the Navy only 2 years ago, but she was very good with the radar machines. The alien ships just flew over Busan Naval Base. They stayed there for exactly 3 minutes, taking pictures of our missile launchers. Captain Yoon laughed quietly to himself. Yes, the aliens had taken many pictures of the missiles they could see on the surface. But they had missed so many things hidden underneath. For the past 10 years, South Korea had been digging tunnels deep under the ground, connecting all their military bases. They had built secret factories under mountains where no spy satellites could see them. Every car factory, every electronics company, every place that made washing machines could start making weapons in just a few hours. The aliens thought they were looking at everything, but they were only seeing the parts humans wanted them to see. In Seoul, far from the ocean, Dr. Seo Min-sik worked late into the night in his laboratory. He was surrounded by computers and strange machines that made quiet humming sounds. His student, Nam Yura, sat nearby with papers covered in numbers and drawings that looked like math homework but were actually much more important. The aliens were listening to all phone calls and reading all emails, thinking they were very clever spies. They had even intercepted Dr. Seo's research proposal about studying alien technology. But what they did not know was that Dr. Seo was not asking permission to study their ships. He was already doing it. Every time the alien ships moved, they left invisible trails in the air like footprints made of energy. Dr. Seo's machines could read these trails and figure out how the alien ships worked. It was like watching someone cook and learning the recipe just by smelling the food. "Professor," Nam Yura whispered, looking at her computer screen with excitement. "I think I understand how their shields work. They use a special frequency like a radio station that only they know about. If we can copy that frequency, we can break through their shields." Dr. Seo finished her sentence with a smile. "How much time do you need?" 2 days. Maybe less. While the scientists worked in Seoul, something else was happening in small towns all across the world. In community centers and church basements, in school gymnasiums and library meeting rooms, groups of people were gathering for what looked like normal neighborhood meetings. In the city of Daegu, former Marine Sergeant Bae Kyung-so stood in front of about 50 people sitting in folding chairs. There were old grandmothers, middle-aged shop owners, teenagers, and even some children. To anyone watching from outside, it looked like a boring community meeting about local problems. But Sergeant Bae was not talking about street repairs or school budgets. He was teaching them how to fight aliens. "Listen to me carefully," he said in a voice that made everyone pay attention. "My grandfather fought Japanese soldiers during the occupation. He had no fancy weapons, no modern equipment. Just his brain and his will to never give up. My father fought in the Korean War at a place called Pusan Perimeter. The enemy had better guns, more soldiers, newer tanks. But we held the line." An old woman in the front row nodded. She remembered those days when everything seemed hopeless but somehow they had survived. "Both my grandfather and my father won their wars because they understood something important," Sergeant Bae continued. "We do not fight just to stay alive. We fight to win. And that is what these aliens do not understand about us. The aliens had computers that could hear every phone call and see every email, but they could not understand the stories being told in these meetings. They heard words like grandfather, and war, and fighting, but their translation machines could not explain why these stories were so important to humans. They did not know that Koreans had been invaded many times by many different enemies, and that each time the people had found a way to survive and fight back. Up in space, Admiral Thexvar sat in his command chair looking at reports that made no sense to him. His intelligence officer, Subcommander Velthor, showed him charts and numbers that were supposed to explain what humans were doing. "Admiral," Velthor said, "something strange is happening down there. In the past 3 days humans have been making 3 times more stuff than usual. But they are not making guns or bombs. They are making radios, medical supplies, and food that can be stored for a long time. Maybe they are getting ready for a long war," Admiral Thexvar guessed. "Maybe, sir. But there is something else that is very strange. Every human military base is sending out the same message over and over again." "What message?" "Just one word, Wolverines. The Admiral's computers tried to figure out what this meant. They knew that wolverines were small, tough animals that lived on Earth. But why would human soldiers keep saying this word millions of times? The computers could not understand that it came from an old movie about teenagers who fought enemy soldiers. It had become a secret code word that meant, "We will never surrender." As the deadline got closer, Admiral Thexvar began to feel worried. These humans were not acting like any other species he had conquered before. The clock on Admiral Thexvar's command ship showed exactly 14:30 Sol time when the deadline ended. He sat forward in his chair, waiting for the messages of surrender that always came from conquered worlds. His officers stood ready to receive the formal documents that would make Earth another possession of the Dominion fleet. But instead of surrender messages, something very different happened. Every radio, every television, every computer on Earth began playing the same voice at exactly the same time. It was not the voice of a president or a general. It was the voice of a 12-year-old girl. Park Ji-young stood in her elementary school in Seoul, speaking into a simple microphone. She was the student council president, used to talking in front of her classmates, but today she was talking to alien invaders from space. Her voice was clear and strong, not scared at all. "To the alien ships above our world," she began, "our teachers told us stories about every army that ever tried to make Korean people kneel down. The Mongol armies came with thousands of horses and said we had to obey them. The Japanese came with modern guns and tanks and said fighting back was impossible. Your ships are big, but bigger armies than yours have come to our land before." She stopped talking for a moment, and when she spoke again, her young voice sounded like it carried the spirits of all her ancestors. "We learned how to say no to every enemy that came to our shores. Today we say no to you too. Earth will not surrender." Admiral Thexvar felt confused and angry. Why was a child speaking for an entire planet? Where were the government leaders? Where were the military commanders begging for mercy? But before he could give orders to his crew, something incredible happened. All across Earth, from every city and every town, powerful energy signals suddenly shot up into space. The Admiral's computer screens lit up with warning lights as waves of electromagnetic energy hit his fleet like invisible hammers. "Sir," shouted Navigation Officer Kexthin from his control station. "We are getting hit by massive energy pulses from the planet's surface." Before the Admiral could answer, all the lights on his command ship went out. Then the lights came back on, but something was terribly wrong. His communication systems were dead. He could not talk to any of the other ships in his fleet. Each ship was now alone, cut off from the others, floating in space like islands. Down on Earth, Dr. Seo Min-sik stood in his laboratory with a big smile on his face. For 3 days and nights, he and scientists all around the world had been working on a secret project. They had turned every radio telescope, every satellite dish, every communication tower into a special kind of weapon that could jam alien communications. "Phase 1 is complete," he announced to his team and to the hidden network of scientists on every continent who had helped build the quantum disruptors. "The alien ships cannot talk to each other anymore. They are confused and alone." Admiral Thexvar was indeed confused and very angry. No primitive planet had ever been able to do this to his fleet before. He decided to teach these humans a lesson they would never forget. He ordered his weapons officer to destroy a small, empty island in the Pacific Ocean as a demonstration of power. The island disappeared in a flash of light so bright it could be seen from space. The Admiral thought this would surely make the humans surrender immediately. Instead, something even stranger happened. Videos began appearing on every communication channel Earth had. High school student Kim Tae-young in Busan showed how he and his friends had built electromagnetic pulse weapons using parts from old smartphones and computers. An elderly farmer named Grandmother Oh Myung-suk demonstrated how her rice fields could hide missile launchers that looked exactly like farming equipment. But the message that made Admiral Thexvar truly afraid came from an old man standing on a simple apartment balcony in Seoul. Retired Colonel Jang In-soo looked directly into the camera and spoke in a calm, steady voice. "Admiral," he said, "you just showed us that your weapons work exactly once against a target that cannot fight back. Every Korean grandfather who fought at Pusan perimeter with old rifles from World War II just watched you waste your ammunition on empty rocks. We have been fighting enemies smarter than you since before your people learned to fly between stars." The old colonel held up a small device that looked like a smartphone. "This little machine contains everything we learned about your weapons in the past 3 days. By tomorrow morning, every resistance group on Earth will know how to build defenses against your attacks. You came here thinking you would fight primitive cave people. Instead, you are about to learn what happens when you give humans something new to copy and improve." The transmission ended, but across the planet, millions of people began broadcasting similar messages on radio frequencies the aliens thought were secret and secure. Teachers showed their students how to build communication jammers from classroom electronics. Factory workers demonstrated how assembly lines could be changed to make weapons overnight. Even children shared videos of science projects that could interfere with alien sensors. The countdown that was supposed to end with Earth's surrender had become something completely different. It had become the beginning of the fastest technological revolution in human history. And it was being led by a species that had spent thousands of years learning to turn every invader's strength into their own weakness. Admiral Thexvar sat in his silent command ship, cut off from his fleet, watching millions of humans tell him they were ready to fight. For the first time in his long career of conquest, he began to wonder if he had made a terrible mistake. The sun was just coming up over Seoul when the alien ships finally came down from the sky. Large metal boxes descended like elevators from the motherships, carrying soldiers who had conquered dozens of worlds before Earth. These soldiers wore shiny armor and carried weapons that could melt through steel. They had been trained to take over planets full of scared, helpless people. But as their ships landed in the empty streets of Seoul, something felt very wrong. Major Hwang Jiziak crouched in the dark subway tunnels deep beneath the city. The aliens had scanned these tunnels from space and decided they were just simple train tracks, nothing important. They had no idea that Korean engineers had spent years connecting every tunnel, every basement, every underground parking garage into one giant hidden network. The Major held a small radio that looked like a regular phone but was actually something much more advanced. Korean scientists had built it using alien technology they had stolen and improved in just 1 week. "All units, this is Seoul Command," he whispered into the radio. "Wolverines are active. Repeat, Wolverines are active." All across the city, people hidden in buildings, sewers, and underground rooms heard the code word and knew it was time to fight. The alien soldiers marched through the streets in perfect straight lines, just like they had been taught in training. Their armor was thick and strong. Their weapons could destroy tanks. They expected to find crowds of crying people begging for mercy, or maybe some human soldiers trying to fight with old-fashioned guns. Instead they found nothing. The streets were completely empty. No people, no cars, no sounds at all. It was like the entire city had disappeared overnight, leaving only empty buildings and silence. The alien commander felt nervous but kept his soldiers moving forward. They were heading toward the government buildings where they expected to find the human leaders hiding. But as they walked down the main street, something terrible happened. The attack came from everywhere at the same time. Grandmother Park's son, he sat in her apartment window 5 floors above the street, watching the alien soldiers through her old binoculars. She was 80 years old and had lived through the Korean War when she was just a little girl. She remembered hiding in basements while bombs fell on her neighborhood. But this time she was not hiding. She pressed a button on a small device in her lap. Instantly, the pretty flower boxes that decorated the street below exploded with perfect timing. But these were not ordinary explosions. Dr. Seo Min-sik and his team had spent days figuring out exactly what frequency of sound and energy would make alien armor break apart. The flower boxes contained special bombs designed to make the alien soldiers' protection useless. 3 blocks away, on top of a tall building, Lee Soo-min pulled back her bow and took careful aim. She had been an Olympic archer before retiring to teach children how to shoot. Her arrows were not ordinary arrows either. Each one had a tiny electronic device attached to the tip, designed to shut down alien communication equipment when it hit. She had practiced archery for 30 years, hitting targets much smaller than the alien sensors on the soldiers' helmets. Her first arrow flew through the air and hit its target perfectly. The alien soldier's helmet went dark as all his electronic systems failed. Then she shot another arrow and another and another. Down in the subway tunnels, Major Hwang Jiziak listened to reports coming in from all over the city. Every few minutes, his radio crackled with good news. "Seoul Command, this is Gangnam Team. We have disabled 12 alien soldiers using electromagnetic pulse devices built from old computer parts. Seoul Command, this is Hongdae Team. The aliens walked into our trap. We used their own energy weapons against them after we figured out how to reverse the power flow. Seoul Command, this is University Team. The alien soldiers tried to call for help from their ships, but we are jamming all their frequencies with equipment we built in the physics lab." The Major smiled. This was not the kind of war the aliens had expected to fight. They had come expecting to battle primitive humans with simple weapons. Instead, they were fighting an entire population that had spent 1 week learning to build miracles. Every person in Seoul had a job in the resistance. Children used toy drones with cameras to spy on alien movements. Teenagers built computer viruses that could crash alien equipment. Shop owners turned their stores into weapon factories overnight. Even pet dogs were trained to carry small bombs that could be remotely detonated when aliens came near. But the most amazing thing was how fast the humans learned. Every time they captured a piece of alien equipment, it was taken apart and studied within hours. Every time they discovered how something worked, they found a way to build it better. The aliens had thought they were fighting people with stone tools and fire. Instead, they were fighting people who could steal advanced technology and improve it faster than the original inventors. As the sun rose higher over Seoul, Admiral Thexvar received reports from his ground forces that made no sense at all. His soldiers were not advancing. They were not even holding their positions. They were being systematically hunted and defeated by a species that should not have been able to hurt them. For the first time in his career, the admiral realized he might have made the biggest mistake of his life. He had not come to conquer a primitive planet. He had given advanced weapons and technology to the most dangerous species in the galaxy, humans who refused to surrender. 6 months had passed since the aliens first appeared in Earth's sky. Now Admiral Thexvar sat in his command chair, but everything had changed. He was no longer the proud conqueror who had demanded Earth's surrender. Instead, he was trying to save what was left of his crumbling empire. The war had not ended the way anyone expected. Earth had not surrendered, and the Dominion had not won. Instead, something incredible had happened that changed the entire galaxy forever. Captain Kang Miho, who had once watched helplessly from the space station as alien ships surrounded Earth, now stood on the bridge of a magnificent new warship. The ship was called the EDFS Liberation, and it was humanity's first vessel that could travel faster than light. But this was not stolen alien technology. This was something humans had built themselves, using everything they had learned during the invasion. Kang Miho looked at the video screen where Admiral Thexvar's tired face appeared. The alien leader looked much older now, and his voice no longer carried the cold confidence it had 6 months ago. Admiral Thexvar, Kang Miho said politely, we have been hearing interesting news from across the galaxy. 3 more planets in your empire have declared their independence this month. They say our resistance broadcasting network taught them how to build quantum disruptors using their own communication equipment. This was the truth that terrified the Dominion leadership. The humans had not kept their victory secret. Instead, Dr. Seo Min-sik and his team had done something unprecedented in galactic history. They had taken all the advanced technology they had learned and given it away for free to every oppressed species in the galaxy. The instructions were simple enough that any civilization with basic electronics could follow them. How to build communication jammers from radio equipment. How to turn power generators into electromagnetic pulse weapons. How to create computer viruses that could crash Dominion control systems. How to organize resistance networks that could not be detected by alien surveillance. The technique that had freed Earth was now spreading like wildfire across dozens of worlds. Species that had been enslaved for generations were suddenly building weapons and fighting back. The Dominion Empire, which had seemed unstoppable for centuries, was falling apart as planet after planet rebelled successfully. What do you want from us? Admiral Thexvar asked. His voice was quiet and defeated. Gone was the arrogance he had shown when he first demanded Earth's surrender. Now he sounded like someone who knew he had lost everything. President Lee Jae-won appeared on another part of the screen. She was still the leader of South Korea, but now she also represented Earth in something called the Galactic Liberation Alliance. Behind her stood representatives from dozens of other worlds that had won their freedom using human-taught resistance methods. We want the same thing we have always wanted, Admiral, she said calmly. We want to be left alone to make our own choices about how to live. The only difference is that now we are strong enough to protect that right. And we are helping other species protect theirs too. Former Marine Sergeant Bae Kyung-so, who now commanded Seoul's defense forces, joined the conversation. You came to our world expecting to conquer primitive people. Instead, you gave us a reason to reach for the stars. Every trick we learned to fight your invasion, we are now teaching to anyone who wants to breathe free. Every weapon we built to defeat your forces, we are sharing with anyone who asks. The final voice in the conversation belonged to someone Admiral Thexvar remembered well. Park Ji-young, the 12-year-old girl who had defied his ultimatum, was now 13 and served as Earth's youngest ambassador to the new alliance of free worlds. Admiral Thexvar, she said, her voice still young but carrying wisdom beyond her years, you taught us something very important about the universe. You showed us that there are people out there who think freedom is something you can negotiate away, that surrender is inevitable when facing superior force, that resistance is pointless against overwhelming odds. She paused, and her next words would be remembered in history books across the galaxy. But you also showed us something else. You showed us that there are species like humans who believe the exact opposite. We did not fight you because we had no choice. We fought you because we chose to fight. And now every species in the galaxy has the same choice to make. The transmission from Earth was being broadcast live across hundreds of worlds. On planets where Dominion governors had ruled for generations, ordinary people watched as the mighty Admiral Thexvar sat speechless before a teenage girl from a world he had tried to conquer. The Dominion fleet began leaving Earth's solar system the next day. They were not retreating in victory but fleeing in defeat. Behind them, they left not a conquered world, but a revolution that was spreading faster than their fastest ships could travel. The age of Dominion expansion was over. It had been ended not by a superior military, not by advanced weapons, not by overwhelming force. It had been ended by the simple and terrifying realization that some species cannot be broken. They can only teach others how to break free. As the alien ships disappeared into space, children in schools across Earth were already learning new languages from other worlds, studying engineering techniques from alien civilizations, and preparing for humanity's next great adventure among the stars. They would go not as conquerors but as teachers, carrying the most dangerous idea in the galaxy, that freedom, once awakened, can never be put back to sleep. The last message sent to the retreating Dominion fleet came from those same schools. Thank you for visiting Earth. We learned much from you. We hope the next species you meet learned as much from us.